The entire history of the development of life on Earth is a series of evolutionary explosions and mass extinctions. After some of them, life began to rebirth virtually from scratch. The largest extinction at the moment is considered a cataclysm that occurred at the boundary of the Permian and Triassic periods. Today, we will talk about the causes and consequences of this giant ecological catastrophe. The videos on this channel tell about the appearance and disappearance of various living organisms. By subscribing to the channel, you can be the first to know about the release of new videos. Your likes and comments will help to make our videos more interesting, and thanks to the activity of subscribers, they can be seen by more viewers. Researchers estimate that in a relatively short period of time, approximately 90% of marine and 70% of terrestrial species disappeared. Some of them were unique and possessed traits uncharacteristic of subsequent species of living beings. But this greatest extinction in the history of our planet has some conventionally positive aspects. The disappearance of animals of the end of the Permian period gave a chance for development to other groups of living organisms in the first place. It touched dinosaurs and other reptiles. For the next 185 million years, they became the masters of the globe. But in the shadow of these giant lizards, the first mammals were born and began to develop. Later on, it also led to the emergence of such a creature as man. The cause of extinction, as in other similar cases, was a sharp change in the planetary climate. Most of the inhabitants of the Earth simply could not adapt to the new living conditions, but disputes about what provoked climate change do not subside in the scientific community. The cause of the dinosaur extinction 66 million years ago is still visible to the naked eye. It looks like a huge crater from an asteroid in the Gulf of Mexico, but scientists have not yet found traces of the collision of the Earth with any such object at the boundary of the Permian and Triassic periods. Therefore, in recent decades, several theories related to the causes of the Permian extinction have been put forward. Some scientists believed that climatic changes at that time were associated with the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea. The appearance of such a large formation changed the relief of the seafloor and affected the overall depth of the world's oceans. Also, many researchers note a sharp decrease in the level of oxygen in the seas and oceans of that period. Both options may well explain the disappearance of a large number of marine animals and plants, but the inhabitants of land in such conditions would have suffered less, or the process of their extinction would have stretched for a longer time. The most solid version for many years was a long volcanic activity. The main part of this activity came to the so-called Siberian trappas. This name was fixed for the traces of lava, which have a stepped form. Trappa from the Swedish language can be translated as steps. Until the year 1992, it was thought that for about 5 million years there had been intense eruptions in Siberia. When a stream of red-hot magma, called plume, rises to the surface, it begins to melt the Earth's crust. Something similar, only on a much smaller scale, can now be observed in the Pacific Ocean near the Hawaiian Islands. 25 million years ago, the sea overflowed on the expanses of the Siberian plain. Lavas, volcanoes threw millions of tons of ash and various gases into the atmosphere, all of which spilled back in the form of acid rain. The greenhouse effect intensified, the planet began to gradually heat up, and the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. The entire history of the development of life on Earth is a series of evolutionary explosions and mass extinctions. After some of them, life began to rebirth virtually from scratch. The largest extinction at the moment is considered a cataclysm that occurred at the boundary of the Permian and Triassic periods. Today, we will talk about the causes and consequences of this giant ecological catastrophe. The videos on this channel tell about the appearance and disappearance of various living organisms. By subscribing to the channel, you can be the first to know about the release of new videos. Your likes and comments will help to make our videos more interesting, and thanks to the activity of subscribers, they can be seen by more viewers. Researchers estimate that in a relatively short period of time, approximately 90% of marine and 70% of terrestrial species disappeared. Some of them were unique and possessed traits uncharacteristic of subsequent species of living beings. But this greatest extinction in the history of our planet has some conventionally positive aspects. The disappearance of animals of the end of the Permian period gave a chance for development to other groups of living organisms in the first place. It touched dinosaurs and other reptiles for the next 185 million years. They became the masters of the globe. But in the shadow of these giant lizards, the first mammals were born and began to develop. Later on, it also led to the emergence of such a creature as man. The cause of extinction, as in other similar cases, was a sharp change in the planetary climate. Most of the inhabitants of the Earth simply could not adapt to the new living conditions, but disputes about what provoked climate change do not subside in the scientific community. The cause of the dinosaur extinction 66 million years ago is still visible to the naked eye. It looks like a huge crater from an asteroid in the Gulf of Mexico, but scientists have not yet found traces of the collision of the Earth with any such object at the boundary of the Permian and Triassic periods. Therefore, in recent decades, several theories related to the causes of the Permian extinction have been put forward. Some scientists believed that climatic changes at that time were associated with the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea. The appearance of such a large formation changed the relief of the seafloor and affected the overall depth of the world's oceans. Also, many researchers note a sharp decrease in the level of oxygen in the seas and oceans of that period. Both options may well explain the disappearance of a large number of marine animals and plants, but the inhabitants of land in such conditions would have suffered less, or the process of their extinction would have stretched for a longer time. The most solid version for many years was a long volcanic activity. The main part of this activity came to the so-called Siberian trappas. This name was fixed for the traces of lava, which have a stepped form. Trappa from the Swedish language can be translated as steps. Until the year 1992, it was thought that for about 5 million years there had been intense eruptions in Siberia. When a stream of red-hot magma, called plume, rises to the surface, it begins to melt the Earth's crust. Something similar, only on a much smaller scale, can now be observed in the Pacific Ocean near the Hawaiian Islands. 25 million years ago, the sea overflowed on the expanses of the Siberian plain. Lavas, volcanoes threw millions of tons of ash and various gases into the atmosphere, all of which spilled back in the form of acid rain. The greenhouse effect intensified, the planet began to gradually heat up, and the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere began to fall rapidly. Worst of all in this case had to marine inhabitants. Increased water temperature led to the disappearance of a huge number of a variety of microorganisms. Only anaerobic bacteria felt well at that moment. These organisms began to actively process sulfur, releasing water and atmospheric hydrogen sulfide, which further worsened the situation. But after a while, the continued warming of the water caused an increase in the decomposition of bottom sediments containing methane. This increased the greenhouse effect even more. Then atmospheric oxygen was used for oxidation of a huge amount of methane. The long-term extinction of almost all terrestrial fauna, associated with the next weather cataclysm for many years, became the main version of the events that occurred at the end of the Permian period. But in 1992 year, a group of scientists from the University of Birmingham conducted a study on the first of the sites of the Italian Alto on the basis of samples taken. There was made an amazing discovery. Traces of the presence of living organisms ceased to fall in the layers of rocks for a very short period of time. Scientists reported that the Permian extinction lasted not millions, but at best tens of thousands of years. The whole theory of a gradual increase in the greenhouse effect and a decrease in the amount of oxygen required a serious revision. Opinions of a collision with an unknown space object of large size were again voiced in Australia. A small amount of shock quartz was found, the grains of sand bearing the marks of a violent impact. In the region of Antarctica were found isotopes of helium and argon special structure. It is believed that such compounds were characteristic of meteorites rich in carbon. These celestial bodies existed at the dawn of the solar system. Indirect evidence of the collision of the planet with an asteroid was found a lot, but here is the crater scientists found and could not find on this search for the causes of the greatest extinction, for some time hushed up, and all new evidence was based on existing findings and theoretical studies. In particular, some scientists have suggested that in addition to the volcanic activity itself, the burning of coal deposits in Siberia had a great impact on the process. Of course, the coal caught fire under the action of hot lava, but the products of combustion, which got into the atmosphere, significantly complicated the already difficult situation on the planet. Closer to us, periods of major volcanic activity always ended with a decrease in average annual temperature. For example, scientists recorded a decrease in temperature after the eruption of the volcano Pinatubo in the 90s of the last century. A similar situation was after the eruptions of volcanoes Krakatoa and Tambora in the 19th century. It caused crop failures on the entire European continent in the 17th century. In South America, there was a serious eruption of the volcano Huayna, while in Russia for 3 years were crop failures and severe famine. In the case of the extinction of the dinosaurs, volcanic activity caused by the meteorite fall led to the beginning of another ice age. But at the end of the Permian period, this mechanism worked, on the contrary, by a strange coincidence of circumstances. The temperature on Earth rose, not fell in the standard scenario of such cataclysms. Everything looks quite simple. The veil of smoke and volcanic dust becomes impenetrable to the sun's rays. The sun ceases to heat the atmosphere and the surface of the planet, and the climate on Earth becomes much colder for a sometimes prolonged period of time. But about 251 million years ago, nature decided to take a different path. Cause of climate warming at the end of the Permian period, some scientists believe the destruction of the ozone layer. In fact, substances that are released during volcanic eruptions are capable of destroying atmospheric ozone molecules. True, this in no way explains why ultraviolet rays were not absorbed by sulfur dioxide. The amount of sulfuric acid elements that are released during eruptions are able to protect the atmosphere and the surface of the planet from sunlight. Another mystery associated with the Permian extinction contradicts the theory about the death of living organisms from the consequences of volcanic activity. The peak of this activity occurred in the territory located in the northern hemisphere. But for some reason, the flora and fauna in the tropical belt of this hemisphere suffered much less than in a similar zone of the southern hemisphere. Interestingly, a large percentage of endangered species occurred in the circumpolar regions of the planet, according to scientists' estimates. In the process of the catastrophe, the water at the poles became warmer by about 15 degrees Celsius, and in tropical zones its temperature increased by 10-12 degrees. But given that near the poles the water was initially colder, the circumpolar ocean waters were still more attractive to marine animals. Now on our planet are similar processes. Global warming has led to the fact that marine animals began to gradually move to colder waters. That is, they are in search of more comfortable living conditions. Moving from the equator to the poles is just instantaneous by evolutionary standards. Many species took only tens of years to change their habitat. Why didn't the animals of the late Permian do the same? It is unlikely that evolutionary mechanisms 250 million years ago worked any differently. Some researchers claim that the warming and subsequent extinctions were caused by a sharp increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But there is also evidence that about 55 million years ago, the carbon dioxide content was about the same as at the time of the Permian extinction. Even the average annual temperature was only 1 degree lower. This period scientists call the Pliocene and the Price maximum. But then there was no global extinction. On the contrary, the number of living organisms and diversity of species strove to increase. Was warming the cause of the greatest extinction in the history of the Earth? The large amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere causes intense plant growth. This is followed by an increase in the number of herbivores and the predators that eat them. There is also more living space for all animals. All the above facts suggest that the climate warming that occurred at the end of the Permian period could not have led to a mass extinction, but it did happen. In the 2017 year, a group of scientists from Switzerland conducted a study of samples collected in the territory of China on the results of research. They concluded that traces of the presence of life disappeared from the sediments about 10,000 years earlier than previously thought. It would seem that by the standards of Earth's evolution, an extra 10,000 years can't affect anything. But in that time period there was a decrease in the level of the world's oceans, but with a strong warming the water in it should have become more. Based on these data, scientists decided that the extinction occurred during the period of cooling and warming caused by volcanic activity occurred later. Perhaps the answer to the riddle of the causes of the Permian extinction was found in the early 21st century. Modern research methods have allowed to find a rather strange geological formation hidden under the ice of the south pole of the planet. It has the form of a crater with a diameter of almost 500 kilometers. The middle part of this crater consists of very dense layers of rock. Such density could arise due to the fall of a large celestial body. To obtain a crater of such dimensions, diameter steroid should be at least 20 kilometers. For comparison, it is worth saying that the diameter of the crater, which appeared at the fall of a meteorite that ended the era of the dinosaurs, is only 180 kilometers. Methods of analysis available to modern scientists say that the age of the Antarctic crater does not exceed 500 million years. But to say for sure that it was this meteorite caused a global catastrophe at the end of the Permian period is impossible. Now it is under a layer of ice, more than a kilometer thick. But the Siberian ramps are located almost on the opposite side of the globe from the place of impact. Maybe in the future, scientists will be able to somehow confirm or deny one of the versions. But so far, to put a definitive point in the question of the causes of the Permian extinction is impossible. Chalk Polyanovi. Extinction was not the most massive in the history of our planet, but it is the most famous, because it was then the extinction of the dinosaurs. In addition to them suffered a variety of groups of living creatures, including got and lived then mammals. Adapt to the new conditions of existence was destined to very few. During the study of the issue of mass extinction of species put forward many versions. Now most scientists agree on how the events of 60 million years ago. Subscribe to this channel. In our videos tells not only about different species of these lizards, but also about other prehistoric animals. By subscribing you can be the first to know about the release of the next issue. With the help of comments and likes you can help in the development of our channel and its promotion, according to the algorithms of the site. Paleontology became a separate branch of science about 200 years ago. Its founder is considered a naturalist and zoologist, Georges Cuvier. This French aristocrat put forward a revolutionary at the time of the hypothesis explaining the extinction of animals. Before that, it was difficult for scientists to imagine that some species of living beings capable of complete extinction by themselves. Cuvier believed that mass extinctions are the result of catastrophes on a planetary scale, of course. Such catastrophes were explained by acts of divine intervention. The last of such acts scientists called the flood. But the 19th century was a century of rapid development of scientific thought. At that time it was already well known that many millions of years ago, our planet was inhabited by giant reptiles in 1851st year at the World's Fair in London. Even were exhibited life-size statues of iguanodons in 1859th year. Charles Darwin published his famous work, Origin of Species Theory of the Evolution of Life on Earth has begun. Some scientists argued that the extinction of certain living creatures was facilitated by natural disasters. Others believed that extinction occurred gradually under the influence of competition between the animals themselves. The less successful, and thus extinct, were those who could not quickly adapt to changes in living conditions. It is this point of view prevailed among the majority of researchers for many years to talk about instantaneous by the standards of geology extinction of dinosaurs was not very accepted. To the same confirmed information about the catastrophe that occurred 66 million years ago at the disposal of scientists at that time was not. Now the main version of the extinction of dinosaurs and other species of living creatures at the border of the Cretaceous and Paleogene epochs is the collision of the planet with a meteorite of enormous size. But before the appearance of real evidence of this theory, different scientists put forward many other hypotheses. Outburst of cosmic radiation. There is a version that dinosaurs were killed by gamma rays that destroyed the ozone layer of the planet. This outburst was caused by a supernova explosion or collision of stars in a small distance from the Earth. Disappearance of the ozone layer caused a sharp change in climate, which, in turn, was the cause. Caused the extinction of animals, plants, and microorganisms. Active volcanic eruption, the cooling that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs, was caused by the release of millions of tons of volcanic ash into the atmosphere. But not all scientists convinced that volcanic activity at the end of the Cretaceous period was triggered by the fall of a meteorite. There is an opinion that it could have been a natural process, but from that its consequences were no less tragic. For a few years the planet could remain practically sunless light. This led to the extinction of plants and some microorganisms. Then disappeared herbivorous animals, small, followed by large predators. Opponents of this scenario give very serious arguments refuting the possibility of such a scenario. They say that any volcanic activity affects the climate gradually, and dinosaurs in the process of their development showed a high level of adaptability. This means that the volcanic activity itself could not lead to their rapid extinction of almost the entire territory, the land change in the level of the world's oceans. This phenomenon is called Maastricht regression. It consisted in a drop in sea level to 180 meters. Similar changes accompanied all previous mass extinctions. Most often, the decrease in the amount of water in the world's oceans is due to the growth of glaciers at the polar zones. But some scientists explain the regression of the end of the Cretaceous period by the formation of large mountain ranges in Eurasia and in the western part of America. It was a real disaster for marine life, the most densely populated part of Mare, and the oceans are coastal shelves. They suddenly became part of the land. Many microorganisms, corals, fish also died out. It also affected the number of mosasaurs, which were the dominant reptiles of the time. It is noteworthy that ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs began to disappear long before the described events. Killer plants are one of the most common options for the extinction of dinosaurs associated with plants. It is a lack of food due to cold weather. But some scientists put forward another option for the death of fauna at the end of the Cretaceous period. They believe that at that time on the planet actively dispersed flowering plants. They contained alkaloids, which for the dinosaurs became poison. Their digestive system was unable to adapt to the change in the chemical composition of the food. Change of polarity of the Earth's magnetic field is considered that periodic magnetic poles of the Earth change places for some time. The whole planet remains without a magnetic field, which serves as a natural barrier to cosmic radiation and keeps the atmosphere in place. Some scientists claim that in such a state the planet can stay for thousands of years. It is accompanied by grandiose natural cataclysms, kills living nature, or leads to the appearance of mutations. Tectonic shifts at the end of the dinosaur-era continents have not yet taken their current places, continued their active drift. It was accompanied by shifting boundaries of water and land, drying up of inland water bodies and climatic changes. Also, the movement of tectonic plates caused volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and other cataclysms. A number of researchers claim that dinosaurs did not have enough time to adapt to new conditions. Problems with offspring should not be forgotten that dinosaurs in essence remained reptiles despite the fact that many of them were covered with feathers, and some had already become warm-blooded. They continued to lay eggs. The sex of newborn dinosaurs could depend on the temperature of the environment. Similar phenomena are observed in some species of modern crocodiles. If at the end of the Cretaceous period there was a cold snap, only females could hatch from eggs, given that the cold snap lasted not 1 year. Reproduction of offspring could be greatly slowed down. This eventually led to the gradual extinction of many species of dinosaurs. The weakest point of this theory can be called that together with the dinosaurs died out a large number of completely different animals, including very badly affected then mammals, and they have sex of offspring should not depend on the climate. Mysterious epidemic. There is an assumption that the cause of the extinction of dinosaurs was the emergence of new types of deadly viruses. Scientists believe that they were unable to develop immunity to these diseases in time. It is difficult to imagine that in a relatively short period of time, the pandemic spread around the world. Populations of dinosaurs on different continents could hardly actively contact each other. It is also difficult to assume that the disease equally affected not only land, sea, and air reptiles but also other species of living beings. More adapted competitors are known that by the end of the era of the dinosaurs on Earth inhabited a lot of different species of mammals. They were much more adapted to life in cold climates, however. In size, even the largest of them did not exceed modern badgers. But some scientists suggest that the main prey of predatory and omnivorous mammals were the eggs of dinosaurs. This could have led to a decline in the population of even the largest lizards. Perhaps to protect against such a threat, the shells of dinosaur eggs became more durable, but because of this, not all the cubs could get out of them independently. Also among the researchers are of the opinion that the presence of animals that actively fed on eggs influenced the change in the habits of their dinosaurs are considered that the dinosaurs were not good parents. They didn't raise their cubs or even monitor their clutches, but the parental instincts of the later dinosaurs were much stronger. Many of them built nests and protected their cubs. Some scientists also attribute the appearance of plumage to necessity. Egg hatching. Global evolutionary experiment. This theory belongs more to conspiracy than to science in certain often pseudo-scientific circles. Theories about controlled evolution are put forward allegedly. The whole process of development of life on the planet is part of the experiment of unknown beings, or some higher intelligence. Every extinction is the consequence of an experiment gone awry. Followers of this conspiracy theory are also thinking about the fate of mankind, perhaps an extraterrestrial spore. The mind will realize that the experiment with mankind also did not achieve the necessary results, and then the testing ground in the form of the planet Earth will be cleared for the next attempt. But most of the proposed reasons for the global extinction of life on Earth could be a consequence of the fall of a large meteorite in support of this theory. At the moment collected enough serious scientific facts, the first suspicions of meteorite bombardment of the surface of the planet were voiced in 1979th year paleontologist Luis Alvarez. At an international conference in Copenhagen, he presented a paper on the increased content of iridium in sediments of the relevant age he discovered them in 1977 while examining rock samples in the Italian Alps. Iridiums belonged to rare earth metals in such quantities before it was found only in the remains of asteroids. And in 1978th year near the Mexican city of Chicxulub was found a round crater with a diameter of about 150 kilometers. At that time, scientists knew more than 50 craters of different sizes, but their origin remained controversial. Matter is that the craters that appeared many millions of years ago, by the described period, were not so pronounced. For comparison, it is possible to look at a surface of the moon. This object has appeared long before extinction of dinosaurs, having broken away from the Earth. But on the moon there is no atmosphere and water in a liquid condition. Because of it, on its surface practically any geological changes do not occur. The boundaries of the crater from the Chicxulub meteorite can still be seen only due to its huge size. The scale of the catastrophe that befell the planet after its fall also had a grandiose character. In 1981st year at a conference in the American state of Utah about the presence of iridium deposits was said by other scientists. This metal was present in rock samples about 66 million years old that were taken from Scandinavia to New Zealand. Alvarez's theory found a large number of followers, but there were also those who tried to prove otherwise. Interest in studying the layers of the late Cretaceous period increased among both the former and the latter. It was then that a decrease in the level of the world's oceans, climate cooling, activation of volcanoes, and other facts were revealed in general. The process of extinction, which took several million years, can be described as follows. Meteorite fall into the ocean caused a huge tsunami wave up to 100 meters high, washed away huge coastal areas. An explosive wave of gigantic power circled the globe several times. All this was accompanied by fires, earthquakes, and eruptions. In the air rose hundreds of millions of tons of rock volcanic ash of various gases. Recent studies say that together with the meteorite fall were located deposits of silicate rocks. Their particles, with a diameter of 0.8 of a micrometer to 8 micrometers, rose into the air and became an insurmountable obstacle to the sun's rays. Modeling of this situation showed that volcanic ash and other consequences of eruptions are not capable of creating such density. Scientists estimate that a permanent winter could drag on for 10-15 years. Freshwater ecosystems in the seas and oceans were able to recover faster from the consequences of the cataclysm. The basis of all life diversity is phytoplankton. Rivers and ICD. Lakes are saturated with necessary microelements, first of all from washed-out rocks. This can explain the survival of freshwater crocodiles, turtles, birds, and bony fish. If you think that mammals have not been affected by these problems, you are sorely mistaken. Their number and diversity of species has been reduced to minimal levels. They were simply already more advanced creatures compared to reptiles. This helped them not only survive the harsh conditions, but also quickly rebuild their numbers. Mammals rapidly occupied the vacated ecological niches and colonized the planet anew. Subsequently, the evolution of one of the surviving species led to the emergence of new masters of the planet, humans. But by all signs, the next catastrophe of planetary scale is just around the corner, and who knows, Maybe in a few tens of millions of years, some new creatures will search for the reasons of extinction of mankind. Or maybe humans will be able to prepare for the new challenges and will remain the dominant species for one more cycle. We are grateful to viewers who watch our episodes to the end. If you are interested in the age of the dinosaurs, as well as other geological periods of our planet's history, then pay attention to the previous clips. From them you can learn more about the origin of different species of living beings and the development of life on Earth.